Story 1. Emma's Friend. Moving to an old farmhouse in Lockwood, Missouri, was supposed to be a fresh start for our family of 4. After my husband lost his job, the sudden inheritance of the property from his great-aunt seemed like a serendipitous gift. The land sprawled over a couple of acres, with the house looking like something out of an old-time movie, complete with a rickety fence and a swing set in the backyard. The moment we moved in, little Emma, our 3-year-old, was drawn to that swing set like a moth to a flame. I remember her excited shouts, "Mom, look, a swing!" We laughed, letting her tire herself out as she merrily pushed her imaginary friend on the swing. It was harmless, we thought. Within days, she started referring to her imaginary friend as the little girl. At breakfast, she'd narrate tales of how the little girl used to live in our house and would play on the swing every day. Honestly, we were more impressed by her creativity than concerned. Kids do have vivid imaginations after all. But then, strange things started happening. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and found all the chairs overturned. When I asked Emma, she shrugged and whispered, "The little girl did it. She's unhappy." I assumed Emma was testing boundaries, a phase perhaps. However, our stay in Lockwood quickly devolved from peaceful to eerie. Lights would suddenly flicker, doors would slam unexpectedly. On one unsettling evening, as I made my way to the basement to fetch some old toys, the door slammed behind me. I wrestled with the knob, but found myself trapped. It felt like forever down there, until my husband heard my panicked shouts and rescued me. Emma, looking up from her drawings, simply remarked, "She doesn't want you here." As days passed, my earlier amusement with Emma's tales turned to dread. My eldest son, Mike, also grew wary. He confessed to hearing footsteps outside his room at night. Yet, it was an incident with my husband that convinced us something was very wrong. It was a crisp morning, and I watched from the kitchen as he walked upstairs. Minutes later, I heard a horrified scream and a thud. Turning around, I found him sprawled at the foot of the staircase, clutching his leg. He looked at me, terror in his eyes. "Someone pushed me, I swear." It was then that our attempts to rationalize everything ceased. We decided to dig deeper into the history of the house. The town's local librarian helped us find old newspaper clippings about the property. A chilling revelation awaited us. 70 years ago, a young girl had tragically passed away in a house fire right where our home stood. She loved playing on the swing set. We couldn't ignore the signs any longer. Even Emma became withdrawn, repeatedly saying, "The little girl is unhappy that we're living in her house." But nothing could have prepared us for one fateful night. Awoken by a strong smell of smoke, we found the house engulfed in flames. Panic set in. Racing to Emma's room, we found her calmly sitting on her bed. "I warned you," she whispered. "The little girl said it's too late." Desperately, we tried to exit, but none of the doors would budge. It's like they were all locked from the outside, trapping us in. The heat intensified, and our hope dwindled. But in that dire moment, adrenaline kicked in. My husband, in a Herculean effort, shattered a living room window with a chair, creating an escape route. The cold night air was a stark contrast to the scalding heat inside. We watched our supposed fresh start turn to ashes. The haunting silhouette of the swing set was the only thing left unscathed in the backyard. As dawn broke, we decided unanimously we wouldn't return. Whatever memories the house held, they weren't ours to keep. We were just grateful to have made it out alive. Today, all that remains of our short stay in Lockwood is scarred memories and Emma's innocent words, "She doesn't want you here." If only we had listened sooner.
Story 2. Unearthed Secrets, a Haunting Cold Case. It's not every day that a medical examiner is called to revisit a long-forgotten cold case. The details of this particular case had faded into obscurity, buried in the dusty archives of a small-town police department. But then, out of nowhere, a detective called me, requesting my expertise. He believed there was more to this unsolved mystery than what met the eye, and I was about to discover just how chillingly accurate his suspicions were. The cemetery, bathed in the eerie glow of a waning moon, seemed like an unusual place to start investigating a crime. But there I was, shivering as the cool night air settled around me. The detective, a tall, shadowy figure in a trench coat, stood beside me, his breath visible in the cold. "Dr. Anderson," he began, "I hope you're ready to delve into a mystery that's been haunting this town for years." I nodded, pulling my lab coat tighter around me. "I'm all ears, Detective?" "Call me Detective Granger," he replied. Detective Granger then led me to a particular grave, worn and forgotten, just like the case itself. We watched as the gravediggers worked by the dim light of their lanterns, carefully uncovering the wooden casket that held the victim's remains. It was the coffin of Amelia Thornton, a woman whose death had puzzled the town for decades. As I observed the exhumation, a feeling of dread crept over me. I had handled numerous autopsies, but something about this case felt different, more ominous. Detective Granger had a theory that Amelia had been poisoned, and new evidence had given him the urge to unearth the truth. The coffin was eventually lifted from its resting place, revealing the rotting wood. With a sense of unease, I approached it, and with gloved hands, began the painstaking process of opening it. The creaking of the coffin lid seemed deafening in the quiet cemetery, and I could feel the eyes of the detective burning into my back. Inside the coffin lay the body of Amelia Thornton. She was dressed in a tattered gown, her pale skin oddly preserved, given the years that had passed. Her features, though weathered, were eerily lifelike. I could almost imagine her breathing, the cold air causing her chest to rise and fall. Carefully, I examined her remains, collecting samples for toxicology testing. Detective Granger watched my every move, his face etched with anticipation. As I worked, I couldn't help but feel as though Amelia's lifeless eyes were following me, accusing me of disturbing her eternal slumber. Hours turned into an eternity as I meticulously dissected the body, looking for any trace of poison. The detective's patience wore thin, and he finally spoke. "Dr. Anderson, there's something you need to see." His voice trembled as he pointed to the inside of the coffin. I turned my gaze toward the dark interior of the casket. My heart skipped a beat as I saw it. Deep, parallel gouges, like the desperate clawing of fingernails, etched into the wood. They were unmistakable, evidence of a horrifying truth. Amelia Thornton had been buried alive, left to struggle and suffer beneath the earth's suffocating embrace. She had clawed and scratched, desperately trying to escape her premature grave. The detective and I exchanged horrified glances, realizing that this cold case had just taken an unthinkable turn. As we closed the coffin and left the cemetery, the chilling memory of those fingernail marks stayed with me, a reminder that some mysteries were better left buried. Detective Granger and I had unearthed a secret that would haunt us for the rest of our lives, a truth that went far beyond the realm of the natural. The events of that night changed me, and I couldn't help but wonder if Amelia Thornton's restless spirit was still seeking justice, or if something far more sinister lurked in the shadows of that forgotten cemetery, waiting to reveal itself once more.
Story 3. The Haunting of Allerton Mansion, a college retreat gone horribly wrong. It was a crisp autumn day when a group of us college students embarked on a journey that we thought would strengthen our leadership skills and forge unforgettable memories. Little did we know, those memories would be etched in our minds forever, for an entirely different reason. We had arrived at the majestic Allerton Mansion in Monticello, Illinois, an imposing structure with an eerie beauty that sent shivers down our spines. The mansion was situated amidst a sea of red and gold leaves, casting long, eerie shadows across the grand entrance. The air was thick with anticipation and excitement as we gathered in the foyer, awaiting instructions from our retreat organizer. As I gazed around the ornate hallways and marveled at the timeless decor, I couldn't help but wonder about the history that lurked within these walls. Our first night at the mansion was filled with laughter, bonding, and a welcome dinner that was nothing short of extravagant. We explored the opulent rooms, each decorated with antique furniture, elaborate chandeliers, and mirrors that seemed to hold secrets of their own. That's when it all began. I remember retiring to my room, the weight of the history and the grandeur of the place still lingering in my thoughts. The mansion's corridors were dimly lit, casting eerie, dancing shadows on the walls. As I stood before the antique mirror brushing my hair, I froze. In the reflection, there was a young woman, barely more than a ghostly silhouette. She had long, tangled hair that obscured most of her face, and her eyes held an indescribable sadness. She was wearing a flowing white nightgown that billowed around her, adding to the ethereal and haunting image. For a moment, my heart seemed to stop, and I could feel a chill creeping up my spine. It was as if time had frozen, and I was locked in a gaze with this spectral figure. I dropped my brush, and it clattered to the floor, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the mirror. The woman's lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. Panic surged through me as I tried to make sense of the situation. Was someone playing a prank on me? But how could they have created such a lifelike image in the antique mirror? As I continued to watch, a sense of overwhelming sorrow radiated from the apparition. It was as though her very presence was infused with the weight of a tragic and unspoken story. Her eyes, though mostly hidden by her tangled hair, seemed to plead for something I couldn't quite grasp. Summoning all the courage I could muster, I took a step closer to the mirror, my fingers trembling as they reached out to touch the cool glass. Just as my fingertips grazed the surface, the image of the young woman began to fade, like mist dissipating in the morning sun. She slowly disappeared from view, leaving me standing there, bewildered and shaken. The room felt empty, the mirror now reflecting only my own bewildered expression. Terrified, I stumbled out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest, and found some of my fellow students. I shared my experience with them, half expecting to be met with laughter and disbelief. However, they too had their own eerie encounters. One of our friends claimed to have heard whispers echoing through the corridors during the night, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and yet surrounded her, causing her to break out in a cold sweat. Another saw fleeting shadows that danced along the walls when the mansion should have been empty. We decided to investigate further, driven by curiosity mixed with fear. We discovered that the mansion had a long and tragic history. The previous owner, a reclusive man, had lived there with his wife, but she had mysteriously disappeared, leaving behind a legacy of unanswered questions. As we delved deeper into the mansion's history, we learned that the wife's disappearance was shrouded in mystery, with no one ever finding out what had truly happened to her. Rumors whispered that her reflection had been the last thing her husband had seen before she vanished. That night, as we huddled together in the dimly lit mansion, we couldn't escape the feeling that we were being watched. The mirrors seemed to hold 1,000 secrets, each one more haunting than the last. We could feel the presence of that young woman, her silent plea for help echoing in our minds. As our retreat came to an end, we left Allerton Mansion forever changed. We had experienced something beyond our wildest nightmares, something that defied explanation. The mystery of the mansion's past and the eerie encounters we had faced haunted our dreams, leaving us with a chilling reminder that some secrets are best left buried.
Thanks for tuning into another episode from the Alley of Nightmares. If you enjoyed the video, please like it, subscribe, and share with all your friends. Until next time,